Hi, welcome to Look Ma No Hands. My name is Linda, and this is my little YouTube channel where I talk about all things crochet and yarn, what I've been reading, what I've been watching. Recently I've been getting back into painting, and I also have a little segment that I call Fancy Footwork, where I show how I do various tasks using my feet. Just something that, skills that I've obtained through my lifetime so that I can accomplish daily tasks. So as you can see this week, I'm not wearing anything crochet. A lot of my crochet pieces are more conducive to colder weather. I have a small handful of headbands and things like that, but not much that can be used now as the weather is getting warmer in the Northern Hemisphere. I don't typically wear like sweaters or things like that during the summer months, spring and summer months. So right now I'm kind of at a loss for something to model in terms of finished pieces that I have to show. That being said, you would think that I would be working on a few more lightweight garments or accessories that I could show off, but I decided this week to work on another blanket, mainly because I want to use up some leftover yarns. I'm trying to kind of stitch down the yarn that I have, so I'm working on the 12-point star blanket designed by Bella Coco. It's kind of like my go-to pattern to use when I want to use up leftover yarns, when I just have little bits, odds and ends of this color or that color. And for this particular design this week, I'm using various shades of yellow and orange. I have just a lot of smaller bits of that, and then one kind of stray skein of kind of a peachy color. So that'll be the final color to put on the outside edge of the blanket. Typically, since this pattern is worked from the center out, I go with whatever the smallest ball of yarn is that's left and work the center until I run out of that yarn, and then move on to the next smallest color and just kind of go like that until each color either runs out completely or until I think that I won't have enough to complete a full revolution around the blanket. I will cut, even if there's a little bit left, cut it off and then start another color. So far I've gotten maybe 8 colors stitched into the blanket. In the beginning, the first color went around about 6 or 7 times, and then each color after that was like maybe 1 or 2 times. Now I'm kind of to a point where it's just one time around. So like I said, a great way to use up little bits of this and that, odds and ends. I like just kind of choosing a color palette and just going and pulling all the colors that fit into that palette. So there might be like a surprise color in there just because I felt like kind of breaking things up a little bit. I threw in like a chocolate brown in between the more pastel and bright colors, just to kind of give a delineation and hope that it's not too stark of a color change between the pastels and the brights. We'll see what happens. Sometimes the color plan works out great and sometimes not so much. But yeah, that's what I've been stitching this week. Not a lot going on in terms of what I've stitched. So there's that. Part of it is just because I worked on a painting this week. So taking some time away from the all day long stitching into doing a little bit more with my painting. So since we're talking about that, let's move right along into what I painted this week. This week I decided to do another lesson from the Art Sherpa Cinnamon Cooney. I just really like her lessons. Like, she's very concise with her explanations. The camera work that John does is really good. letting you see the details of what she's doing, and just her calm demeanor and her encouraging words of like kind of getting through it. And because she's so relaxed, I feel like I can relax into the art and just feel like I have the abilities to do it, and recognizing with myself that like what I might consider to be a mistake is just part of the process and part of the piece of artwork, and learning how to be more gentle with myself and not so critical of myself. Painting is still a skill that's kind of new to me, so I have to kind of give myself a little bit of grace in terms of learning the materials and learning how the brushes work and how the paints work, and even just like how the environmental elements in my studio can affect the paint from day to day. It's a process to learn. It's kind of like I have to remind myself when I first started crocheting that a lot of times things didn't work out wonderfully, and my finished work was not up to my satisfaction. I felt like it didn't look like the image in the finished pattern, so I would just feel kind of frustrated. And sometimes I feel like that's the way it is with my art, with my painting, that I get overly critical and have expectations of what it should be, and I need to kind of let go of that should be and just enjoy the process. So that's definitely been a learning experience for myself, just letting go of the perfection and paying attention to the development of the skills. This week's painting, I chose to do the easy waterfall landscape. I liked the different elements in the painting, and then after watching the lesson one time through and seeing how different techniques are used to achieve to achieve the look in the finished product, I just really felt like the skills that she was teaching in there would be good skills to build on. So I picked that painting and worked it start to finish. And as the day progressed, started seeing the image come out through what started out as a black canvas, and just seeing that, yes, putting paint to canvas does bring out like a picture, like an image, and every artist has their own flair to put into it. So though my finished painting doesn't look exactly like what Cinnamon did, it's a close approximation, and when other people look at it, they could interpret what it was supposed to be, which I guess at the end of the day is the goal, right? So yeah, that's what I worked on in terms of painting this week. So it was fun and relaxing, and I still have some paint left in my palette that I'll probably take one more run at it, because it was just an enjoyable painting to work on. Why waste the paint in the palette when I can just go back and try one more time? So there's that. Which leads me into what I've been reading this week. Again, not much. I try to listen to audiobooks when I'm crocheting, which works out okay, but when I'm painting, because of kind of the newness of my skills, I have to concentrate much deeper when I'm painting, so I don't tend to want to listen to audiobooks while I'm working on a painting. So in between doing some paintings, I've tried to listen to an audiobook. This week I'm listening to Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and the concept of this story is an alliance between vampires and werewolves. So I guess you could kind of almost consider it like Twilight-ish, if you're familiar with the Twilight series. I would call this kind of like almost a fan fiction type of story. I'm not real keen on it. The writing in the beginning felt very juvenile, for lack of a better way to say. It's kind of amateurish. It was cute in the beginning, but then as they kind of progress through the story, it kind of falls flat. I wasn't a big fan of the style, and I don't know. It's an okay book, but definitely not something that I would go back and reread. So yeah, there's that. And then, of course, what I've been watching this week, much of the same. General Hospital, which, you know, my weekly favorite. I love sitting down and following up on all of the characters in Port Charles. So, interesting storylines unfolding. I am enjoying how they're torturing the character of Emma with her her sentence, I guess you could say, after her little civil disobedience stint that she pulled. It's a very lighthearted, kind of relaxed little storyline going there. I can see some drama kind of unfolding between her and Jocelyn once again. Those two have very much a love-hate relationship. They love to hate each other. So that's interesting. Yeah, kind of fun to watch the young characters be at odds with one another, seeing a new rivalry or an adult rivalry kind of developing from those characters, kind of like Carly and whoever she's at odds with at any given time. So yeah, interesting to see the storyline between Jason and Sasha unfolding. That's interesting. There's moments where you're thinking that they're kind of pushing the storyline in one direction, and then things kind of back up a little bit and another wrench gets thrown into the mix. So that's a fun storyline. And then, of course, good old Sonny and all of his health drama going on. So that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. I'm a little nervous that something's going to happen because things with Sidwell are looking quite ominous. So there's that. Watching 911 this week. OMG. They gutted me. The storyline that unfolded, blindsided, did not see it coming, and the exit of one of my favorite characters. Whew, it was rough. Definitely, the box of tissues was necessary this week. So, yeah, I was, for a good 24 hours, I was not okay. It just seems so silly because it's just a TV show. But, you know, I'm invested. Like, the TV shows that I watch, like, it's important. So, as I said, I love drama in my entertainment, not in my real life. And that was definitely a lot of drama. So, yeah, we watched that. And then Grey's Anatomy. Again, like I said, I like the character development that's happening this year amongst the new cast members and how things are unfolding with the OGs. So yeah, it's continuing to hold my interest. So there's that. And then Dr. Odyssey, it was fun to see the CGI and camera work done to have Joshua Jackson play two characters in the program, so that was fun. Will Trent was good this week. I always love that show. Like, it's definitely kind of a surprising thing that I like it. I'm not typically that interested in like detective type shows, so it's been fun to kind of discover a new genre that I haven't typically. I'm more of like a medical drama person, so watching a detective program, it's been a while since I've been into a program like that. I used to love to watch NYPD Blue, so yeah, it's kind of getting back into that genre. We watch Who's the Boss in the evenings when we're getting settled in for the night. I kind of like to fall asleep to that. It's something to kind of like take my mind away from all the stress of life and all of the big things that I have to think about. Who's the Boss is very just nostalgic and kind of a frivolous thing. There's nothing super serious in there, and it's fun to see actors that we've come to love through the years kind of see their humble beginnings. So that's been a fun watch. Continuing to watch the program Everwood. It's just a nice family show to watch. There's, no real super heavy topics. It's also fun to kind of look back at how, 20, 25 years ago, things in society were viewed, and how some things have changed quite a bit and some things have not changed enough. So yeah, it's just fun to kind of look back on how life was reflected in art at that time and compare it to today. We watched on Prime Video the movie called Dog, starring Channing Tatum. It's the basic plot is this military dog has been put into retirement, and they have plans to put the dog down because of like a PTSD situation where the dog is not really doing a good job of like returning to civilian life. And the soldier that was assigned to that dog died in an accident. And so one of his fellow soldiers is tasked with taking the dog to that soldier's funeral, and all of the antics that ensue with this dog being kind of traumatized and not in a good headspace for being set out into the world. And Channing Tatum has to carefully control this dog, and the dog is just not having any of it. And yeah, it's an interesting watch because you have like all of these feelings towards the dog in terms of like what it's been through, and through the characters in the story and what they've been through, and just it was kind of a heavy movie to watch, but also some lighthearted moments in the storyline that make it a little bit easier to watch that movie. So if you have a chance, it was definitely an interesting movie to watch. I wouldn't say it good just because, like I said, it's a little bit heavy, but if you like dogs and you know of anyone in the military that you want to kind of have a little bit of insight, this is definitely a movie that I would recommend. And then for one of our throwbacks that we decided on this week, Throw Mama from the Train with Danny DeVito. For some reason, when I was a kid, that was a movie that I really enjoyed watching. Maybe it was just because it was so out there and so outrageous. But yeah, we watched it, and my son was just like, what in the world? You liked this movie? Because he's looking at like when the movie was released, like the release date, and I was quite young at that time. And I said, well, there's not really anything that questionable in it other than the concept of like a murder plot. Like he's thinking about ways to kill his mom. But yeah, we watched it, and as we're watching it, he was saying how he could understand like a kid liking the movie just because so much of it was just so silly. And I told him the 80s, man, it was a different time. Like we watched things, reasonably unsupervised. Like our parents didn't really censor too much of what we watched, and that was a cool thing about the 80s, getting away with a lot of stuff that nowadays we probably wouldn't let our kids get away with. And maybe that's why we grew up in a time when we weren't very protected, and now we want to kind of shield our kids from that, which I don't know necessarily if shielding our kids is the best thing, but I mean, we'll know whether or not we made mistakes in the next 20 years, right? So yeah, there's that. I finished watching Umbrella Academy on Netflix. It was kind of like an anticlimactic ending to the series. Maybe there was just too much time between seasons for me, but I didn't really care for the ending, so there's that. And then we also watched the movie Fatherhood starring Kevin Hart. In this story, he's a new dad, responsible for raising his daughter by himself because his wife died during childbirth. So definitely a heavy start to that movie. And then just kind of watching all the dynamics of the different family members involved in the process. They had a very close relationship with the mother's parents, so they play a very heavy role, a very deep role in their opinions of how the little girl should be raised. It was interesting to see like the closeness of all the family, like on both sides, on both the mother's side and the father's side, parents coming together, the grandparents coming together to kind of support him, and just all of the things that a single parent would go through, a parent kind of having to live their life without their partner, and seeing like all the very heavy things, the emotional things of that dynamic. So this is definitely a movie that I would recommend, just because Kevin Hart has, his lighthearted way of infusing a little bit of comedy into a topic that's quite deep and quite heavy-hearted. So it made it a little bit easier to watch something that could otherwise kind of gut you. So yeah, a good one to watch. And then something else that I spent time with on Netflix this week that is not movie related, but or TV related. They have video games on Netflix, which I was aware of, but I know it's kind of like a newer thing that Netflix has been developing. The first time that I tried using any of the gaming options on there, it just wasn't very interesting. It didn't really work out that great. But over the last weekend, I got into one of the role-playing games that they had on there called Oxenfree. The premise of this game is a bunch of teenagers go to like a beach situation, trying to do like a little bonfire type thing, and they venture into a cave near the beach, and some kind of like radio frequency type stuff puts them into like an alternate world where they're experiencing contact from like ghosts and things like that. Some of the characters end up getting possessed. Like, it's just very very strange and kind of like otherworldly, and you just kind of have to go through the levels and complete different tasks to move the story along. And it was definitely something that could really suck a lot of time from you. You don't even realize like how long you've been playing. Like, I sat down and I was like, oh wow, that was like a full hour that just passed. And both my husband and my son were like, wow, it's not very often that mom gets into a video game, but when she does, she sure does, doesn't she? I spent the better part of a day and a half, 2 days playing this game. I started it up late Saturday night and realized, oh, it's getting quite late. So I put it away and went to bed, got up the next morning and started playing right away, because it's just that interesting, or that exciting, I guess you could say. And got into it, started up again, and had to take a little break to go over to my parents' house for dinner, and then came home right away and got right back into it and pretty much played until I finished the story. So yeah, it was a fun game to play. The ending of the story was kind of like, oh wow, I finished? Like that was quick. but it wasn't really quick. It was hours and hours. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's other games on Netflix that I can get into like that. There's definitely a lot of options on there. So if you're a gaming person, you can take a look. Something that I thought was kind of cool is you don't need like a separate controller. They have a QR code that you scan and you just use your phone as the controller. So that was interesting and definitely an improvement that they've made since they started producing games on Netflix. So yeah, and then another thing that kind of consumed some of my time this week was going with my son for him to get his hair cut, and then when we were all done with that, he and I and my mom spent a couple hours on Thursday at the zoo, just kind of walking around, getting some exercise, seeing some of the improvements that are happening at the zoo, and we were pleasantly surprised that there were quite a few animals out. The last few times we've gone to the zoo, it just feels like there's nothing there, but we got to see camels and zebras, and the lions were just lounging around like the lazy lions do. There's a building that they converted into an enclosure for some macaws. So that was exciting because I love parrots. I used to have a parrot. So going in there and just feeling very relaxed, watching the macaws do their thing. So that was fun. Yeah, didn't go into too many of the buildings just because the outside temperature is like my favorite time of year. There's still a slight chill in the air. If the breeze kicks up, it's almost to the point of being cold, but I like it that way. So I didn't want to go into the buildings because all of the buildings around the zoo tend to be towards the warmer side. So as soon as I walk in, I break a sweat, and that's not really fun for me. So we avoided going into too many buildings. But yeah, it was an enjoyable trip to the zoo, and they're definitely making so many improvements. Lots of construction happening at the zoo. Just different enclosures that are getting updates and things like that. So it was good to see. There's an area where there's the condors that almost every time I walk past there, I don't see the birds, and they're not small, they're massive birds. This time there were 2 condors in the enclosure, and that was interesting to see just how truly big they are. Got to see the bald eagle. So yeah, lots of fun at the zoo this time, seeing all of the various animals. So that's pretty much it for this week. No fancy footwork this week. Just had a lot going on besides my usual programming that I have. I'm kind of at a loss for what to do for fancy footwork because I don't know what other people would find interesting. So just trying to come up with ideas of like what I do that other people might want to see, like curiosity of like, how do I do XYZ? So yeah, trying to think of some things that I can pepper in here and there. So if you have any ideas of something that you're curious about, go ahead and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, thanks for stopping by. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of the new videos coming out. And if you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up to let me know what you thought. All right, until next week, take care.